crazy. We are on a mission to revamp our webinars. We did a ton of them when COVID first hit, and we kind of calmed it down a little bit last year. But the feedback from our clients and from people who have been to them in the past was that they really liked the information that we were sharing and the approach that we were taking. So one of my goals for this year is to get back into that space of doing a bunch of these, at least one a month. And I think I've sort of targeted this culture, values, and team concept first up because David and I were just talking about it before everyone else joined. At the moment, we're in this really tight labour market where so many of our clients are saying they just need good quality people, and they're simply not getting them. They're not even getting the applications, let alone, being able to interview and find the right people. And so for me, when you're in that sort of environment, I think your culture and your values really come into their own, either in making the most out of the people you've got and retaining them, or in being able to attract the right people to your team. So for those who don't know us, Focus HR, we're a small business-to-business consulting firm, and we focus on people, leadership, and strategy. That's what we do. We love working with SMEs. We've worked with about 400 different businesses across Queensland mainly, and we aim to help them to build those winning teams, getting their people, their strategy, and their leadership right. We've also got a big picture goal of having a positive impact on the working lives of over 100,000 people by 2030. And we want to do that through coaching businesses around the right approach to people, the right approach to valuing and respecting. And we think that that's probably important now more than ever, because we are aiming for that, retain our great people, have strong leadership so that they are motivated and delivering and giving us that bit of discretionary effort that we desperately need from them at the moment, when we simply can't get more bodies onto seats in our workplaces. And I don't know about you, but it feels like this incredibly polar environment at the moment. We will talk to some businesses who tell us that, they cannot keep up with demand. Business is going through the roof. They've got all this great demand for their services. And if anything, they can't find the people to actually fill that demand. And then we know that there are certain industries and certain businesses out there that are total at the other end of the spectrum, where they're struggling to get enough customers through the door to make ends meet. And so it just feels so very, very polar at the moment. And I think for those of us in Toowoomba, I know a lot of people feel like we're kind of lucky and still relatively insulated in Toowoomba. Renee, hospitality is definitely hurting. That's one of the industries. Anyway, I have used that as an excuse to go and eat lunch out more often because I'm doing my civic duty. That's my excuse anyway. But I think anything we can do to help those industries that are suffering is important. So not sure if everyone got to do the Score app before coming. If you haven't, please still do. You should have a link to it in your invitation or in the reminder that Eloise sent you this morning. So it's only 10 questions. It takes you about 2 to 3 minutes, depending on how quickly you read and how decisive you are. They're just yes/no questions, but they're designed to ask you the kinds of things to explore. Well, how strong are we actually on our culture and our values and in our team building in our business? And depending on what you answer yes or no to, you'll get a rating basically out of 10, because there's only 10 questions. And so based on those results, we will sort of give you a bit of an indication on where you might be sitting. So for those people who are sitting 0 to 4, so you've answered no to most things and yes to only about 4 elements, don't worry, you're not alone on that. There's plenty of people in there. So the businesses sitting in that space, probably not really enjoying being in your workspace each day, which means that the rest of the team might not be either. And you're probably feeling like you're constantly putting out relationship spot fires, that you're having to deal with people who just feel like you're just not getting that sense that they're engaged or that they really care. It's not a brilliant place to be, but you're certainly not alone, and it's not lost. And that's the sort of company that we like to help to put the right practices in place. If you've gotten your 5 to 7, you've got some really good foundations there by way of culture and team, and you're probably well on your way to getting that competitive advantage that comes from it. You might be dealing with a couple of niggles still between your people. You might be having to put a bit more energy than you'd like to in keeping your people in line and keeping them engaged and motivated. But if with the right practices, you've got this awesome platform to be able to sort of build that combination that gets a really great team. And if you're sitting on 8 to 10, you're doing really well. You've probably got a really good competitive advantage in your culture and in your people. And my recommendation to you is bottle that and protect it fiercely and make sure that you keep it. Because I see a lot of businesses too where they've got a great culture and that can slip. We can have, a bad apple come in that impacts it. We can have a rest on our laurels sort of approach to having a great culture. And actually, you look back 6 months later and go, oh, we're not the same as what we used to be. So it's still important to be really conscious of your approach when you are sitting at that end of the spectrum where you are really loving going to work and have a really great team. So this is my reason for being so passionate about culture and people, and that is that people are the most powerful, inimitable asset in your business. And I know that inimitable is not an easy word to say, and most people go, what on earth does it even mean? If you pull it apart, it means it can't be imitated. And I find that that describes it so perfectly. And until we've sort of harnessed that power of our team and our people, our businesses don't actually reach their full potential. And we can copy everything, nearly everything. We can copy machines and IT systems and our procedures and our software. There's so many different things that we get to copy. We can look at other businesses and see how it's done. But what we can't copy is people and teams and culture. That's why I use the word inimitable for that one. And the other part of that is I think we need to realize that even in highly automated environments, everything is driven at some point by a human being. There's human touch points along every service, whether it comes to, delivering a product or delivering a service. There's a human touch point involved somewhere. And of course, because they're human, we've also got potential for human error. And so we need to get those people practices right, because if we're making sure that we keep the errors down and we're keeping our people motivated, we're tapping into the single greatest opportunity in my mind to strengthen our businesses. So we found that the key to harnessing that really powerful and inimitable resource, and the reason why small business owners will reach a place where they feel like they've got those high performing teams, for us over the years, we've discovered it rests in 5 key areas. And before I explain what those are, I just want to tackle one of the most common arguments that I hear from business owners. Doesn't matter what industry we're in, but they say to me, well, my people will just leave anyway. So why would I bother about doing this stuff? Why train someone who's just going to go to a competitor? I've done all this great stuff and I still had resignations. But I guess my 2 key considerations of that are, would you rather a long-standing employee who's become complacent and mediocre and they're showing up for their 9 to 5 job for sure, but they're not really reaching potential, versus a team of really dynamic and driven and purposeful employees who will add huge value for whatever the time is that you have them, even if that's only for a few years. And my second point is that if your business had really curious and courageous leaders and a really bold direction and clear purpose, and you're getting this high engagement and really connected people, don't you think people would actually stay longer with that business? And so the business grows to be more robust and resilient, so that actually by doing all of these things, you are retaining your great people. And people who don't fit that, people who want to be complacent and mediocre, if that's not a fit to your culture, they will self-select out, or your team will select them out, or you will select them out. And so when you sort of commit to this stuff, it gets to be, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. So our 5 elements are vision, which is setting your strategy and letting people know where they're heading. It's your fundamentals, your people practices. It is almost your bread and butter stuff. It's that sort of baseline, what you've got to have in place for employees to know that you are a legitimate, serious business. So that's your policies and your contracts and your feedback loops and your performance appraisals and all of those sorts of things. Relationships, we believe in genuine relationships between employer and employee and also between employees. There's huge amounts of studies that have been done by the likes of Gallup Institute where they show the statistics around retaining employees in environments where people actually feel like they've got a friend at work. People will stay a lot longer where they've got really great relationships. Leveraging is our fourth one, and that's all about having the right people doing the right job in the right way. And leveraging also means that managers and business owners, because they've got the right people doing stuff there, the managers and the business owners get to leverage their own strengths by playing in the area that they're going to bring best value to the business. And our last one is leadership. And it's not last because it's the least important. It's probably just because the way the triangle words fit like that nicely. But ultimately, leadership is just so important. And I make myself really unpopular with other HR people because I'm actually a really firm believer that if we can get leadership right in business and we've got people who know how to be great people managers and people leaders, we can kind of make HR a bit redundant because we don't actually need all the little niggles dealt with. You can still have someone on call, that's great. But ultimately, if you've got really great people leaders, so many of those HRE things just don't even pop up. So, in terms of our culture, I just want to talk a little bit about how culture is our competitive advantage. And what we believe is that people aren't just your best. Your people know how they engage and work together. Sorry. So your people aren't just your sort of, a lot of people have that saying around, people being the best asset or that sort of thing. We don't necessarily see it that way. We see the combination. So it's your people, the team that they form and the culture that they form that is what creates a competitive advantage for you. Again, it's that thing that no one can actually copy. And so when you've got a really strong culture, it creates a ton of value within your team. Your clients actually pick it up as well. It benefits your clients and they can actually tell that you have a really good culture, even if they're not aware that that's what it is. The flow onto them is definitely there. It's also really hard for competitors to see what you are doing to create a good culture, which is why it is so hard to copy. People can't just go in and measure or see what the software is that you're using or that sort of thing. It's really hard for businesses to get a grasp on what are they doing over there that gives them such a great culture. It's also really difficult and time consuming for competitors to match. Even if we could see, oh, right, they do all these really cool things with their people or these really great incentives or values that they give to their employees, it's still a lot of hard yards to turn a culture around. And so your competitors trying to copy, if that's what they do, are going to have a pretty hard road ahead of them. The other point I want to make with culture is a lot of people will say, well, it's owned by management or it's driven by management. And I hear employees say that too. Well, culture's not on me, that's on management. They set it. And it's true that I think probably management or owners in particular have a really heavy influence on it. But actually, every single person in the business needs to believe in it. They need to be invested in it. They need to be aligned to it. And they need to own the culture so that it is actually a success. And so when we do culture workshops with businesses, we actually aim to get the whole team involved in it because if you don't, you'll have your outliers. And where you want to head to with this is kind of the self-fulfilling or protective culture. And I remember I was presenting at an innovation and leadership summit once, and I was talking about culture, and I asked the audience, who here has a really great culture and values, and an accounting firm, a team of women from an accounting firm, put their hand up, and they weren't the owners or the managers; they were actually the administration team had been sent along to this leadership summit as a bit of a benefit, and they said, "Oh, we've got this really cool culture," and I said, "Can you describe it to me?" And they said, "Oh, no, but it's awesome." I said, right, well, how do you know and how do you make sure that it remains? And they said, we just somehow do. Like when a new person comes into the team, when they do something that steps a bit outside of how we like things to be, like in terms of our values and how we treat our clients and stuff, we are all involved in tapping them in the right direction or giving them a bit of feedback. For some people, they stay and they're brilliant. Other people go, look, it's not for me, and they exit out. And I just thought it was so powerful that actually in that environment, it was no longer reliant on a business owner or a manager to be setting the culture. It was in place and it was being protected by everyone who felt really strongly that that was the culture that they want to keep. And I reckon that's sort of that's the ultimate prize when you're in businesses, to get people that engaged that they're willing to protect it. So one of the things we encourage people to actually look at is, what does your culture look like? And this can be a really difficult question. And actually, you can't just answer that yourself if you're the business owner or a manager. You need to ask your people about this. So we use questions that are based on the 10 cultural dimensions by Fiona Robertson. I'm more than happy to share that with you guys. I can send that out. Just drop me a message if you'd like those. There's 10 dimensions that she talks about, and I'll step you through them in a moment. But ultimately, what you need to do is ask your people, hey, what does our culture look like at the moment? I also love asking people, if that's where we are at the moment, where do we need to be? Because one of the things with culture is we might recognize that we've always been, our culture might be very traditional in terms of we only use tried and tested ways in the way that we work, whereas actually everything that's happened at the moment means that we do need to be more innovative. So people can recognize, well, this is where we are now and this is where we'd like to get to. So yeah, definitely asking your people. Do consider using a third party to ask those questions. We can do it. There's also a ton of surveys on the market that you can get to do this sort of thing. It just can sometimes help to get a more honest response from people because they feel safer if it's anonymous. So the 10 cultural dimensions, and before I go into them, I really want to note there is no right or wrong with this stuff. So when we survey, we ask people to say, where are we now and where do they think it should be and how important is this factor? But ultimately, there's no right or wrong. There's no green light, red light on this stuff. It just has to fit your business. So the 10 factors are, the first one's candor. So candor is the extent to which we say what we really think in our business. The second one's internal or external focus. So this is the extent to which the focus is on pleasing the boss and the colleagues versus the extent to which we're actually focused on external customers. Our third is collaboration. So to what extent are we working as individuals versus working as a group? Our fourth is autonomy or initiative. So to what extent are tasks self-directed versus needing to be directed fairly consistently by management? So how much autonomy do people have versus how much initiative they can show? The fifth one is mistake tolerance. So that the extent to which mistakes are avoided versus the mentality that mistakes should be welcomed as long as they're learnt from and prevented in future. The next one's time horizon. So this is the extent to which we look at things on a short, a medium, or a long-term view, and how are we planning and prioritising things? Is it all about our short-term goals, or is it also about our long-term strategy plans that we've got in place? We've then got task or people orientation. So to what extent are the people important versus getting the jobs done? There's concentration of power. So to what extent the authority to make decisions and control is centralised or decentralised? So is it a real pyramid style structure, or is it a very flat structure with a lot of people being able to make decisions? Second last is innovation. So the extent to which tried and tested solutions is favoured versus continuously looking for new ways to do things. And the last one is control versus flexibility. So the extent to which we're following agreed procedures versus the extent to which we've got flexibility in how we go about doing things. And so you can see with all of these that in any single business, there might be one side of the spectrum that works versus the other, and that won't be the same for everywhere. You know, when we talk about mistake tolerance, that's probably a prime example. I know even in our business, we've got a high degree of mistake tolerance in certain areas of what we do. We don't have mistake tolerance when it comes to giving industrial relations support to a business who is looking at terminating an employee. That is not our space to go, oh, whoops, what can we learn from that? That's our space to be really sure that we don't make mistakes. Versus when we're looking at, say, piloting a new training program, and we are delivering it for the first time and we're clear with the people who we're delivering it to, and then we're getting feedback and we're going, oh, that didn't work very as well as we would have, we would have liked it to. What do we do differently? That mistake tolerance is a prime example of where businesses, or even within a business, you might have different areas that accept it versus don't accept it. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts at this point? I'm just going to pause for a minute before I keep going. Nope. If you do, feel free to put them in the chat box as well if you don't want to come off of mute and talk. So the next point I want to make is that there's a lot of businesses that might describe their culture, and they may be able to tell new starters when they come on board, this is our culture. But the next level from that is identifying the types of behaviours that fit that culture. And I think this is just so important because we can all have different associations of meanings with different words. And when we turn it into actually, it's no longer just the word or the describer of this is what our culture is. And instead, I'm going to talk about these are the kinds of behaviours. Here's some stories. Here's some things that have happened in the past that show real consistency with our culture versus here's some stories or actions and things that have happened in the past that are not consistent with our culture. And so we like businesses to go through a process of actually defining that when they're talking about culture, because it helps to give everyone in the team and new people coming on board something more tangible. So some of you may have seen this before, the above the line and below the line. Or is above the line, bed is below the line. This is a really nice way to talk about different behaviours and get people talking about, well, what's the stuff that's above the line, the good stuff, versus what are the behaviours that sit below the line. And so above the line behaviours are those that are consistent with strong cultures, that they exist when people in the team accept ownership and accountability and responsibility. The ones below the line are the ones that you want to avoid. They're the blame, the excuses, the denial. And so one of the activities we recommend doing with a team is you break up into groups. If you're a slightly larger business, if you've got a small team, just do it as a team. The beauty of breaking up into groups is you try to get everyone's voice out, as opposed to having 10 people in a room and your quieter types aren't going to say anything. But getting groups of 2 or 3, and in that group you come up with 5 key behaviours that you say are above the line in our culture and 5 that sit below the line in our culture. And if you know that there are elements of your culture that you actually really want to work on, we also recommend sort of focusing in on those. So when we're talking about, quite often when we're working with a business on culture, it will be because they've identified that there's a bit of an issue there. And so we will focus in on talking about above the line and below the line on some of the issues that we know are sitting there. And so you allow those little groups to take 5 minutes or so to sort of do that, come up with their 5 key behaviours, and then present that back to the group. And when they present back, you get to hear, is there good alignment? Is everyone sort of on the same page with what they see as above the line versus below the line? People have got the opportunity as well to talk about, in a safe environment, behaviours that might have been happening that they do think are below the line. So they might talk about things like, below the line behaviour is when you throw someone under the bus. something's gone wrong and you blame someone else for it. That can be the sorts of things that can happen in some workplaces. And so you get to hear them talking through it, and then you get to talk about, well, how do we make sure that we are all doing above the line behaviours? So that can be a really powerful exercise for people to sort of attribute behaviours to a culture. The other thing that we really like doing is a team charter. And we think they're so powerful in business. I know that they're a bit corny. Come up with another name if you like. I just call it a team charter. I think they're really, really effective. I also think they're particularly powerful when you're using it to integrate new team members into your team. So you're really clear around, here's our charter, here's how we treat each other, this is what we believe in as a team. And it can help when you're bringing kind of straying team members back into the fold if you need to have a conversation. And look, all of these sorts of things, you aim to have great values and culture and team building because they are just so powerful at getting brilliant teams and great productivity. The lovely side effect of them is that they also become really strong as performance and behaviour management tools. Because when you've got really clearly set values and a really clearly set team charter, you also get to call people out if they're stepping outside of that. And when you don't have those things, that can be really, really hard to do because you're talking about a very subjective area when you're talking about, values and those sorts of things. So your team charter describes the way in which you'd like to see your culture be alive within your business. It describes the way we want to be treated and how we want to treat others. And I've taken numerous teams through the process of writing these, and it's a very, when done well, it can be a very healthy and very healing approach for teams to take as well, because often there's a bit of repair to be done there when we're talking about how do I want to be treated. Invariably, stuff comes out about how they don't like being treated. So one of the examples is the All Blacks. If you haven't had a look at this, please do. They have absolutely amazing team charter, and most people know it by the concept of sweep the sheds. And so there's quite a lot of detail behind these. There's wording behind each of these. I've just chucked them all up. This is a very lengthy team charter, by the way. I'm not suggesting you have it this long, but it gives you a really nice idea of the kinds of things. So sweep the sheds as an example. After every single game, those blokes who are earning who knows how much and are so famous sweep their own locker room out. They don't have someone come in and do it for them. They don't have anyone come in and do the tidy up. It keeps them grounded. It keeps them real. And the mentality behind it is that we are never too big to do the small things that need to be done. So that's one of their elements of team charters. And I love, there's so many other good ones there. Pass the ball. The foundation behind that is there are no star players in this team. There are no, people who are going to just do everything all by themselves. You play best in a team when you pass the ball. No dickheads is one of my absolute favourites. We won't accept it. They don't fit. I've also heard businesses who have got that as no turds, which is also very, very effective. So it is really powerful. Their book is called Legacy, I'm pretty sure. I'm so bad at book names. But if you haven't read it yet, please do. It is really amazing. And if you want me to, I can send you through the sort of the full wording behind this, but you can also Google it and it'll pop up. So that's an idea of the kind of thing. And you can imagine when someone joins a team and you sit down with them during induction and you're talking about your cultures and, yep, we're taking them through some HR policies because we have to, and we're making sure that, our contracts of employment are signed and that they've filled in their tax file form and they've done their super choice form, and we're doing all those things that we have to do. But at the same time, we start to talk about, hey, here's who we are as a team. This is how we treat each other. These are our expectations on the people who join our team. And we'd love it if you fit in. We'd love it if you get alignment with these values. And we think you do because that's why we've hired you. But, we're going to keep that conversation alive in the coming months. There's bound to be times when these are challenging to live, and we're going to talk through that. But ultimately, everyone here believes in them, lives by them, and we will fiercely protect them. That's a pretty powerful conversation to have with a new person when they join your team. for me, it can be a preventer of so many little niggles that can arise when we don't set that lovely foundation right from the start. So I want to move on to core values. Does anyone have any questions on the stuff I've covered so far around culture? Nope. Awesome, because I'm talking a lot and I'm halfway through time and a third of the way through the slides. So, core values. There's another really good book. Jim Collins wrote Good to Great. He's pretty famous. I probably don't need to tell you who he is, but he does phenomenal work around cultures and leadership and high performing companies. And he says that really strong performing companies do three things consistently. Firstly, they've got the right people on the bus in the organisation. Secondly, the right people are doing the right things. So they're focused on what's the highest priority and not doing unimportant stuff. And the third thing is that the right people would do the right things right. So they execute with excellence. And there's a whole lot of rights in there, but it absolutely makes sense. We've got the right people on the bus, they're doing the right, focusing on the right things, and they're doing it in the right way. And that beautifully simple. But if we had all of our team members doing that, life would be really, really easy, and we would genuinely have a really high performing business. In order to have the right people on the bus doing the right things and doing them right, it's really vital that we've got clarity around purpose for the business. So why do we exist? And clarity around our core values, that handful of cultural rules that we're not going to compromise on. And really great companies have got really clear plans on what their values are, and they've got really clear plans on how that impacts on their future. So this is our strategy model, and just to explain it very briefly, we basically look at strategic planning in a business as down the bottom here, you've got your foundations. The business first needs to understand what's our purpose, what's our big picture vision, and what are our values. So you can see values sits down there as one of the foundations that drives everything else. We then jump up to what we call the moonshot. So the moonshot is the JFK, within 10 years we'll land a man on the moon, the moonshot goal. We take the same approach. In 10 years' time, what's our moonshot as a business that we want to get to? And then you chunk that back to say, well, what does that mean our 3-year winning moves are? What's our 12-month priorities, and what do we have to get done every single quarter to be able to do that? And so you're taking a really consistent approach at it. Like you can see, value sits down here as a foundation, and they have to drive a lot of other stuff in your business, because if your strategy is inconsistent with your values as a business, then actually you're not going to drive towards it. I'll give you an example of that. So when I first been in business 4 or 5 years, when I first did a strategic planning session for Focus HR, and very naive to it, didn't know what to expect, didn't know what was right or wrong, and presumed that there actually was a right. And so when I sat down and went, right, what is my 10-year goal? What's my moonshot? I thought that it had to be build an empire. And so my first moonshot goal read something like to be Australia's leading provider of HR, payroll, work health and safety, and industrial relations support. I don't know, it was boring and horrible. And actually it sat nothing with my values. There was no connection whatsoever. And so it was fine as a first attempt. We all get our first attempt probably wrong. I'm not criticising our team for what we came up with, but a couple of years later when we challenged it and we went, actually, is that where we're heading? And we went, no. Why not? Well, because I don't want to be there. I don't want an empire. I don't want a massive business. What I want and where my values sit are totally different. So values have got to create that foundation. So the way that we describe our core values is that they are, and look, to me, this is really similar to parenting, not to diminish owning a business or being a parent, but I think it's really, really similar. It's a handful of rules. You don't want too many. You repeat them regularly and you live by them yourself. You've got to model them. And it's really, really simple. But when you can get that right, a lot of things will fall into place. Handful of rules that remain constant, you repeat them regularly, and you live by them. My challenge around values is that it's a little bit different to culture. So, with culture, we get to say, here is where we are now, and here's where we need to be, or here's where we would like to be, and how do we get there? Your values exist at the moment and are actually probably really hard to change. And when you write your values, when you sort of define what are our core values, you cannot go, what would we like to have them as? I know these sound lovely. This sounds like a really great company to work for, because your people will see straight through it. It becomes very hypocritical, and so the effort that you put into it is essentially wasted, and you lose a lot of credibility doing that. So your values are something that you discover by looking inside your business and looking at, well, what do we actually do? The other thing I would say, and again, not to criticize at all, we started with these as well, but when we do workshops with businesses around this stuff, we encourage them to think about unique words that actually mean something to them and their team. So a lot of businesses will have core values that say quality, customer service, respect, teamwork, and they're all really important things. But I would actually argue that they're also just table stakes. If I'm a customer and I'm an employee, and you say one of our values is respect, I'm going to go, well, of course. Shouldn't we all be able to expect that? And so I want stuff when I look at people's values that tells me more about who they are as a company and why they're unique. So we encourage businesses to try to get a bit creative and get creative juices flowing when they're setting this stuff. So I want to show you an example. Atlasian, they're a software development company, very cool business. Just have a look at their website. Each of these has words behind it, but I just love them. So their values: open company, no bullshit. We play as a team. We build with heart and balance. Don't screw the customer, and be the change you seek. They're simple. And I think for anyone reading that, you can instantly get a feel for what each of those actually means. And then there's some wording behind it that you can actually read a bit more detail on. So we really love them. The thing with values, like I said, we started out with quality and respect and those sorts of things. I don't believe our values have changed over time. Our ability to describe them effectively has. And so I'll share ours with you. These are ours, and you will see that we have borrowed from other places. This one in particular, all things heart and balance. We loved Atlasian's wording around that. You are totally allowed to plagiarise from other people. It means different things to us to what it does to them. So for us, it's we understand the role we play, and our wording behind that is around how for different businesses and for different people at different times, they'll look to us for different things. For some people, we've got to play devil's advocate. Sometimes we've got to be the teaspoon of cement. Other times we need to be the fierce defender of a person or a business that is having a tough time. Voice of reason. We understand the role we need to play, and our second piece to that is, and we're willing to play it because we won't be a toothless tiger. All things heart and balance for us is we know there's compliance in HR, we get that, and it's our job to understand what that is, but we have to apply heart and balance in the way that we coach and the way that we apply that, because if we don't, we're not living true to our values. Only stories we're proud to tell. The lengthier version of that is we'll only be part of stories we're proud to tell, and that links directly to our clients. We only want to work with clients who we're proud to be associated with. It's our no turds or no dickheads version, because we're a little bit too politically correct as a HR firm to say that. But for us, we don't want to work with businesses who just want to screw employees over or just want to do the wrong thing. We want to work with businesses who are genuinely looking for great outcomes. Work and fun in equal measure. For those who know me, you would understand that I drive that one. I will not let go of that. I firmly believe that we need to enjoy work, but we also need to have a ton of fun while we're at it. And if I can't come to work and have a good laugh and have a great time with the people I work with, then it's not worth being here. And our last one is stolen or based off of a Maya Angelou quote. We do our best till we know better, then we do better. And for us, that speaks to that idea of continuous improvement and innovation. We absolutely believe that we're doing everything at the moment to the best of our ability. Does that mean that we think it is actually the best, or that something won't come along that is better, or that we don't learn something new? No, we don't believe that we're there. We believe that we're doing the best that we know how right now, and as soon as we see something better, we will move to it. So you can see there's words that live behind all of that. Our team's been involved in building those values, and they know that we will do what I've got on the next slide, and it's a tough gig to do. So one of the questions that we encourage businesses to ask themselves when they're looking at their core values is take a good hard look at yourself and go, if these are my values, will I hire by them? Will I fire by them? And will I take a financial hit to live by them? So for us, that financial hit to live by them, it very much links to only being part of stories that we're proud to tell. We have had clients that we have had to say, I'm really sorry, I just don't think we're a good fit. Of course we lose income out of that. But that's better than not living with our values. I have been in the really unfortunate situation of having to go through a really horrible situation with an employee who seriously breached our values. It's probably one of the worst things I've had to do in my professional career. I never ever want to have to do it again, but I would if I had to. Because I think if you've got really strong values in place, you need to be willing to take a stance on them. And our team here has seen that. They've been part of that journey. They know that we will do the tough calls to make sure that our values stay alive, which means that when we talk about our values and we open them up to say, are these still our values, we get really great conversation because it's not just words on a page anymore. So these are stress questions that you can ask yourself when you are, if you want to have a go at writing some values out for your business, these are your stress test questions. Any questions on values before I click into the last part? All right. Last piece is looking at how understanding the people in our teams can contribute to that great culture and alignment to values. Rachel Robertson, she is pretty awesome. I know she's written a book. She was the first lady to lead an expedition to Antarctica. So it's kind of one of those places where you go there, you get locked in for 6 months. No one can come in, no one can get out. It's that kind of an environment. And so you can imagine that leadership and team in that setting is just so crucial. If you get it wrong, it's going to be a horrible 6 months. And I particularly love this saying of hers, respect beats harmony every time. And the reason I like it so much is we see a lot of businesses who, they value harmony, or the team thinks that harmony is the right thing. So they don't disagree with each other. They're very polite, they're very courteous, they're very professional, all really good things. But I actually think that really powerful teams and powerful cultures come when we respect each other enough to have robust discussions and disagreements and conversations and, the really meaningful, meaty stuff. To help with that, we believe that you've got to kind of understand the whole person. So everything we do at work creates a climate around us. It determines how people see us, and it determines how people feel when they're around us and how comfortable they are to work with us. And the concept of the whole person is quite interesting because we describe it as being a little bit like an iceberg. So there's only 7% of an iceberg that shows above the waterline, and that's our behaviour. Everyone can see how we behave at work. They cannot see the other 93% of us that lives below the surface. And that's why we have so many times in the workplace where people go, I don't get why they're doing that. I don't understand why they behave that way. I don't get why they can't get that right. All those things where you go, I just can't seem to click with that person. And it's normally because of what's below the surface. We don't get it, and therefore we don't understand their behaviours. And so below the surface, we've got our thoughts and feelings. You can't see what my thoughts and feelings are. I might be displaying behaviours that give you hints to it, but you can't actually see what I'm thinking or feeling. Beneath that, again, I've got my values and beliefs, and these are the things that are set in us from a really quite early age. And below that, again, we've got needs. We've all got base level needs. And if you think about it, when we're little kids, we go normally from need to behaviour. I'm hungry, I cry. Someone tickle me, I laugh. Whatever it happens to be, we jump really quickly. As we get older, we have values and beliefs that form over time, and we get more conscious of, hopefully, our thoughts and our feelings. And so all of that stuff tends to bubble up to then become the behaviours that others see in us. And so when we can kind of go, we understand that there is this whole person that I am working with. I get that they have values and beliefs and they've got thoughts and feelings, and there's every chance that they are quite different to mine. Then I get to interpret their behaviour in a different way, and I get to understand that different things might drive them. And so all of this is based on the DISC concept. So DISC is one of those personality-based profiles that we run. I absolutely love it. It helps to kind of understand different people's styles and how they operate and how they're different. So there's a whole profile that you do if you want to do DISC properly, and there's half-day workshops you can run with your team. But to do it in a real snapshot, if you haven't done this before, you can make two choices about yourself. So I just want you to do this in your mind. Your first decision about you is, do you feel like you are typically fast-paced and outspoken? You're decisive, you're outspoken, you tend to say what you think. Just think of yourself as here. Or do you tend to be more cautious and reflective? So you're moderate paced, you like to think things through before you make a decision, you're cautious and reflective. Your next decision to make is, do I tend to be quite questioning and skeptical? So do I challenge the status quo? And another thing over in the questioning and skeptical is that I'm more task focused than people focused. If I got a choice, I'd probably sit and get work done by myself rather than go and work in a team environment. Or am I more accepting and warm? Do I really like working with people? Do I tend to see the best in people, accept ideas and people openly until they're proven wrong? When you've made those two calls, and look, that's such a cheats way of doing DISC, because ultimately you can be a blend of them, but just for the purpose of today, those who are quite fast-paced and outspoken and quite questioning and skeptical tend to be the D style, or the dominance style. Those who are fast-paced and outspoken but really accepting and warm tend to be the I, or influence style. If you find yourself to be quite accepting and warm, but a bit more cautious and reflective and moderate paced, likely to be the S, or steadiness style. And if you're quite cautious and reflective, moderate paced, and quite questioning and skeptical, you're likely to be the C, or conscientiousness style. Has anyone done DISC? Throw it in chat for me if you have. I know some of you have, actually. Just so I know how many people I'm preaching to that already know it. So just to give you a bit of an idea, this is how our DISC model works. And so you've got around the outside of your priorities. So remember when I was talking about the whole of person, I was talking about needs and values and beliefs. They sort of tend to translate then into some of your priorities around the outside of the circle. So a D style, for example, is typically driven by challenge, achieving results, and being action orientated. Whereas an I is still action orientated, but loves enthusiasm and loves collaboration with other people. So if we have a look at the different styles, our D style friends really want to take action. They want to, and typically do, get outcomes. They want to keep moving. They can come across as quite competitive. They can often come across as quite blunt or aggressive, not intentionally, just do, because they're so focused on getting results. And they often don't have a lot of patience for others to catch up. So these are often the people that you hear discussed as, they've gone from A to Z and they can't explain the steps in between, or they're always 2 steps ahead of everyone else and everyone else is trying to keep up. But absolutely powerful in a team, because you can rely on them to drive and get things done. Their downside is they sometimes leave people in their wake, or they've bulldozed over the top of them without actually meaning to. Our I style friends, I really affectionately call them cheerleaders. These are the people who just get excited about things and they've got this really sort of contagious enthusiasm. So they absolutely love cheering other people on. They absolutely love being cheered on, love getting a few claps. They also really enjoy getting in and doing things. So, particularly if it's in a team environment and there's a bit of fun involved in it. Their downside is that once the sparkle has worn off, they tend to get a bit bored. They're not great at the cross the T's and dot the I's. They're not great on follow through or attention to detail, typically. You can't stereotype this. These are just typical um, descriptors of an I style. So awesome to have on the team when you are looking for great energy, someone who can bring some creativity and some fun to stuff. Not necessarily a project finisher though. So our S style friends, it's steadiness in this model. I always call it the supportive style though, just because it fits better in my mind. And so these people are very warm, very supportive, very helpful. They are considerate. They are the ones that you'll hear say, I just want to, I wonder if John's going to be happy with that. Maybe we should just check in with him. Normally, when you hear them described in a TV environment, people talk about them as the mother hen or, the glue that keeps us all together or those kinds of words. They don't like conflict. They will avoid it because they want, if of anyone, these are the ones that want harmony over respect. Because for them, any kind of thing that might create a rift or make someone unhappy is a really bad thing. And on the face of it, they've got very little downside. They're just these lovely, warm, wonderful people to work with. The challenge with them is they are almost their own worst enemy in the sense that because they want to keep everyone happy, they say yes, 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 yes. They agree with everyone. And so they either get caught in the middle of the politics because if they've kind of agreed with everyone and everyone comes to them because they're so wonderful to talk to and they end up carrying this huge load, or they keep saying yes to helping people with certain jobs, can't actually deliver on it all because they're not Superman. At the end of the day, don't actually then deliver to someone, makes them unhappy, which means that they're unhappy. So they've got a bit of a catch-22 situation going on. And then our C style friends are our favourite OCD characters at their best. So they are really comfortable when they're very competent at their job. They love being the expert or being just really comfortable and solid at what they do. Value accuracy and stability. They tend to be they like to be set in their ways. People say they're change averse. I don't necessarily believe that. I think it's just their natural tendency to want to be good at what they do. And they will absolutely pick up on stuff when quality isn't right. They also have absolutely no energy around that. And so the way that they will deliver the message to you can quite often come across as offensive or abrupt because they'll just say, that's wrong. And the rest of us go, oh, didn't want to, soften that up a little bit, anything like that. But no, and it's unintentional. But you can see that with all of those different styles, there are these things, these drivers or these behavioral qualities in us, which can naturally and inadvertently create relationship issues with different styles. So the D's drive for results can easily get an S style personality off guard because they go, well, all you care about is results. You don't care about the people. The I person who's enthusiastic and happy and wants to have a ton of fun. And if I make a few mistakes along the way, that's all right. For a C style personality, they're going, nah. And can you please just leave me to work and quiet? I want to shut my door and I want to get things right. And I can't believe that you can't spell properly. That those are the kinds of things that when they're left undealt with can fester. So we love using DISC as a way to help people in a team to understand each other better and understand that a lot of the times those niggles or the things that irritate you are actually unintentional. The other point on this is, when we talk about our personality styles and even working in a workplace with set values and culture is we're quite often needing to stretch our rubber band. And by that, I mean, I've got my personality style and I've got my own values. When I'm in a workplace, there's every likelihood that I've got to stretch a bit. There might be a couple of values that I've got that are different to the company's, but largely I'm aligned. Or I'm a DI style personality, and I have to work with C styles and S styles, and so I have to stretch to be able to work effectively with them. But the thing with stretching a rubber band constantly is that if you keep doing it, or if you hold it out all the time, it snaps. And so we like to encourage people at any level in a business to be conscious of what it is that you do that stretches you. And also then what can you do to recharge your batteries? What are the things that you get to do that give your rubber band a rest? It might be the making a cuppa, it might be 5 minutes in the sun. It might be ticking something off your to-do list if you're that action-orientated person. Knowing what recharges your batteries is really, really important in the workplace, because when we stretch our rubber band too much and we snap, we are talking about a behavioural snap in a lot of instances, which of course can then do damage in the workplace to a team and to a culture. So I need to wrap it up. My final points are, if you have this kind of stuff set that we have talked about today, if you know your team's styles, if you've got a great charter, if you've got great values, make sure it's visual. Get this stuff on your walls, get it on your screensavers. I don't know, print it on t-shirts, put on coffee mugs, whatever you want to do, whatever floats your boat, whatever suits your culture. Just make sure that it is out there so that people are seeing it. Make sure that you get it into your recruitment process. Get that language into your adverts. Make sure you're interviewing people to check for it. Make sure you're covering it during your induction so that people understand what you're about. And if you're doing DISC, make sure you make that part of your culture as well in terms of bringing new people into the fold in that space. I just want to cover really quickly for you a little offer on this. If you've liked this stuff, and I'm really hopeful that you've taken some stuff that you could just go and apply or have a play with yourself. And please feel free to give me a call after this as well. But just so that you know, food for thought. If you like the DISC stuff, consider doing it with your team. I'd also seriously recommend surveying your people around values and culture if this is something that you need to find. We do run the culture and values workshops, and we do have one coming up on the 5th of April. And actually it's a full day session if you want it to be, where we do the DISC workshop at the start, and we also then do the culture and values journey. Let's help you to define it. Let's help you to get your team charter written. Let's help you to get that right wording around your values so that they're actually meaningful words. So if you do want to get involved in that, please reach out to me. Happy to have a bit of a chat about what that might mean. And we've got a special offer up there for participants of this webinar. So just out there if you're interested. But otherwise, thank you. You've done very well. You've listened to me for an hour straight. Hopefully, I can't tell if you're all listening. Some of you might be doing emails. But I really appreciate everyone participating or being here with me. So does anyone have any questions, any comments, anything you would like to cover? No? That's all right. I will let all of you get back to your very busy days. Oh, thank you for the thank yous. I'll let you all get back to your busy days, but if you need anything, please reach out. As always, I'm happy to if you can't tell, I love this stuff, so happy to have a chat further about it. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Super. Thanks, Naomi.
See you, Angela.